Don't be frightened by things in the night, things you can see or things out of sight. Joseph was a man visited by dreams, following God's plan that saves and redeems. Joel stretched his hand out through the raging waters to save his beloved. The waters swelled and pooled until he could no longer hear her voice. He held onto the strong branch with his other hand, because it was the only thing that could bring them back to safety. He screamed out to her in desperation for any kind of reply. He finally wailed at the loss he had to endure. Then suddenly he realized there was no beloved out there in the waters. She had never been there. He was confused about his thinking and embarrassed by his outlandish actions. There was a sudden quiet and darkness. Then a surge of pounding water rammed into him. It was he who was drowning, and he was trying to save himself. The water roared like a lion into him. He tried to call out, but no sounds came out of his mouth. When he awoke, he was shaking under blankets and pushing away the lion. His eyes caught sight of a mountain man stoking a campfire in the darkness, but his mind had turned off whatever his eyes were telling him. It wasn't until the next midday that he started putting everything together. He was crossing a rising river on his horse and thought he could make it. The horse was nowhere that he could see. He concluded that it was lost. Joel watched the mountain man commute with nature for 2 days, but had to get back to the plains. He had no horse and no gun. The mountain man gave him a clean set of clothes that some foreigners left when they came through that area. Joel made himself a walking stick and headed for the nearest town up in the hills. Don't be frightened by things in the night, things you can see or things out of sight. Joseph was a man visited by dreams, following God's plan that saves and redeems. Joel came to a town made up mostly of foreigners. He tried to get a job, but there were none around, except for a teacher for the children. He told the town representative that he could read and write, but not nearly enough to be a teacher. The representative replied that Joel knew more than any of the children will ever have a chance to learn. Joel accepted the job. For a better part of a year, he learned a lot about children, and he learned a lot about going to church on Sunday. It wouldn't look right for the children's teacher not to be with them in church. He also learned enough foreign words from the children to express simple thoughts. Then a new candidate for teacher arrived in town. He knew both English and the foreign language of the children. Joel stuck around for a while, but he had to decrease. He left the town after buying a horse and a gun and headed for the plains. Don't be frightened by things in the night, things you can see or things out of sight. Joseph was a man visited by dreams, following God's plan that saves and redeems. Joel rode through a few towns until he came to one that looked more inviting. Perhaps it reminded him of the town in the hills. A few of the people here spoke the same foreign language of that town. Again, he had trouble finding a job. When the ranchers asked him where he worked last, he had to say that he was a teacher, and that ended the interview. He eventually accepted a job at a family restaurant in a fairly large building that looked like a barn. Inside were rows of wooden tables for people to sit down and eat. The family that ran it were the same kind of foreigners as in the town in the hills. Joel kept the place clean and also helped serve the plates of heaping food. There was a girl from the same foreign land that worked there. They would occasionally exchange words in her language so that their thoughts would be more private. He often said a few words of encouragement when she seemed down. One time when the place was crowded, she dropped a big bowl of stew on the floor. The stew was scattered everywhere. Joel got on his hands and knees to help clean the mess. He saw that the girl's shoes, always clean, were smeared with the stew. He washed her shoes with a wet rag, dried them with a towel, and spoke in her language to comfort her in her tears. In a short time, Joel and the girl got married. Don't be frightened by things in the night, things you can see or things out of sight. Joseph was a man visited by dreams, following God's plan that saves and redeems. Joel and his wife did not have enough money to get a home. They started looking for a job that would include a place to stay. Joel was further away from being a ranch hand than before. They heard of openings at an orphanage in a nearby town. The thought of working at a scary orphanage made them both hesitate, but they decided to inquire about the jobs anyway. When they saw the orphanage, it wasn't far off from what they imagined. While strolling on the grounds, a child was running so fast she started to stumble. Joel stretched out his hand as far as he could and caught her arm. The child barely acknowledged him and ran off again. Joel recalled his dream at the river. When Joel and his wife found out that the job called for them to practically run the orphanage, they accepted. They both felt that they could turn it into a more cheerful place. There were currently 12 orphans living there. The funds for the orphanage were extremely limited, but both felt that they could ask for support or do without. There was a church nearby. Help would not be far away. Don't be frightened by things in the night, things you can see or things out of sight. Joseph was a man visited by dreams, following God's plan that saves and redeems.